Yo, what's checking, everybody? Welcome to the Orangebloods postgame show here on the Orangebloods Texas Football Channel. Following Texas losing in the Alamo Bowl tonight, 27-20, to a decent Washington team, but let's not go overboard. They weren't great either. I'm Jeff Ketchum. That is Jason Sukamel. This show brought to you by the Loewy Law Firm. If anybody injures you, hurts you, you need a lawyer, to go get you some cash. That's what Adam Loewy does. He gets people paid when they're injured, when they need a personal injury lawyer or somebody to help them out. He's there for them and been a loyal sponsor to the show for a really long time. Jason, a lot to talk about in this one, although at some point we're going to have to spend a long section on Xavier Worthy. He's not the reason why Texas necessarily loses this game, but he will be an incredibly big talking point going into the offseason with the performance that he had today. I wrote about this, though, in my instant analysis of the game. Texas just wasn't good enough in any area. They didn't run the ball well tonight. They weren't efficient enough in the passing game early on. There was a little Quinn Ewers involved in that in the second half. Xavier Worthy had an all-time stinker of a third quarter. The interior of the offensive line didn't play well defensively. I thought the secondary and the interior line played well, but this defense, it's been so good this season, couldn't get off the field in the second half when they needed to. These stats kind of blow my mind. I need to double check and make sure that they're right because the stats froze, the official stats in the fourth quarter. Texas finishes the game with 0 tackles for loss, 0 sacks, and other than the interception by Jaron Thompson very early in the game, and quite frankly was a ball kind of thrown right to him by Michael Penix Jr., Texas defense really just didn't make enough plays. Special teams other than Burt Auburn, nothing to really write home about. It just was a total team performance that wasn't good enough. And again, we'll focus, Jason, on a number of players and elements of what didn't happen tonight. But at the bottom line for me was this wasn't something that if you're a Texas fan, you keep on your DVR beyond like the next 24 hours.
Yeah, lots of process. They didn't get any sacks. They didn't get any tackles for loss. You're right. The stats are finally updated. But they did get 9 quarterback hurries, compared to Washington by comparison had 4. I mean, they got to Penix, and Penix hardly ever gets sacked. But they got to him and made him kind of throw off schedule a little bit, which I think is kind of what you want to do there. Xavier Worthy, we'll talk about him, I know. When you said he's not the reason they lost, well, he's a pretty big part of it, man. I mean, he's not the reason, but he holds a big chunk of the responsibility. And like I said in my post-game analysis, the first paragraph I wrote, I said, this feels like a game of missed opportunities for Texas, but I said it also feels like a game in which the better team won. I don't think Washington was great by any means. And I said, hey,
they were better, though.
They were better. If these two teams played 10 times, especially if Texas had a full complement of its players, I think both teams probably win about half, 50-50 of those games, 5 apiece roughly. But Washington was the better football team tonight. A little bit cleaner on offense. They played pretty well on defense. I thought tackled pretty well, and they didn't shoot themselves in the foot the way Texas did. I mean, we talk about Xavier Worthy. Jordan Whittington had a bad drop on a drive killer on third down. It wasn't an easy. Well, it was a pretty easy catch. It wasn't a perfectly thrown ball, but Texas just made more mistakes than Washington. Washington capitalized, and I think the better team won tonight. And just sucks for Texas, man. And it's going to leave a bad taste in the mouth of the Texas fan base going into the offseason. Quinn Ewers, I thought he really struggled some in the first half, played better in the second half, didn't get a lot of help from the people around him. Did he answer the questions that needed to be answered going into the offseason? Probably not. I think we're about the same point with the quarterback situation that we were going into this game. But, kind of a frustrating night, I'm sure, for everybody watching the show. But I just feel like Washington was the better team tonight, and that was reflected on the scoreboard.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Eric Torres says with the super chat, Major, Connors, Hudson, DJ Campbell killed us tonight. the interior of the offensive line was not good. Opt-outs wouldn't have mattered. It starts up front. Worthy drops hurt, but again, it starts up front. We need a portal center and a tackle. I disagree with you, Mr. Torres. You can't tell me that the opt-outs you cannot tell me that Bijan Robinson and Roschon Johnson would not have mattered tonight had they played on a night when the Texas running backs combined for 45 yards rushing and a long run of 7 yards. Texas missed. That's one of the things that won't get talked about, I think, enough in this game, Jason, was Texas's offense really for the first half. Like in the second half, Ewers played a little bit better, and that when you have good quarterback play, and Ewers, I thought, played his best football probably since the OU game in the third quarter. He wasn't completely rewarded with the long touchdown passes with Xavier Worthy and the one touchdown pass to Xavier Worthy that should have happened that didn't, that I can't even – I'm speechless with regards to what to say to a ball that just – he's in open space, hits him in the hands, and he just featherstoned it from Necessary Roughness. I know that's like a 30-year movie reference, but those of you who are in the chat right now that are old enough to have seen the Kathy Ireland-led, Scott Bakula-led former movie, you will appreciate that reference. It, God, I don't know. Like
Quinn Ewers in the third quarter catch was 5 of 8 with a touchdown, 91 yards. And I think all 3 of those were drops by Xavier Worthy, those incompletions. He had the one early on the drive where they ended up scoring, and then he had the 2 back-to-back. So 5 of 8 with 3 drops by Xavier Worthy.
I didn't need to go back and – I'm not going to split hairs here because you could very well just call it 3 drops.
The second one – the
second one just looked like he didn't locate the ball, and it's still on him.
Went off his hands. I mean, it was low, but it went off both of his hands. I mean, you got to make that catch, dude. If you're
at the end of the day, I mean, if we're gonna have the Xavier Worthy, I feel like there's gonna be a moment in this show when it turns into an Xavier Worthy pile session, and I don't know if that moment is now or if we if we mention again. This Texas missed the 3 players that opted out in this game. I think it missed DeMarvion Overshown as well as Jason, you pointed out the Texas defense did play well enough to win this game.
I mean,
what's that?
I said Tucker Dorsey had 10 tackles. He was pretty active.
Yeah, but they weren't all good tackles. when you look at Washington running for, I think 158 is the number at the end of the game that they finished with. And it was a lot of that was in the second half. And you think about that 90-yard drive that Washington turns into a touchdown that really ends the game. Again, the defense played. If you tell me going into the game that Washington, it's funny because I had the score 27-26 and I called it a coin flip. So if you told me before the game that Washington scores 27, I probably would have shoulder shrugged because I'm not quite sure I knew what would have happened in that game, given that I thought 27 would win the game, but it probably should have been enough to win the game. Texas didn't have an identity on offense in the first half. It's worrisome going in to next season because the thought was Jonathan Brooks has a big game tonight, kind of reestablishes that they're going to be okay in the running game. And then you move forward going into 2023. It feels like the offense needs a complete rebuild at this point going into next season. And the defense has some stuff that they've got to replace at each level of the defense. But the running game wasn't good tonight. It made me really wonder how good the offensive line had been this season and how much was having 2 NFL running backs in the backfield really, really important.
No, we don't really know because they didn't give Jonathan Brooks a chance. I mean,
true.
What do you get? 6
Jonathan
carries?
Brooks had 6 carries in this game.
Keelan Robinson 8. I mean, Keelan outrushed him, and I don't know. I didn't understand the Running back rotation, I didn't understand some of the play calls with the running backs. I mean, Brooks is a volume carry guy. He's always been since high school.
Jaden Blue never got a carry in this game, which
I don't think he ever touched the field.
What they tried to do in the running game tonight was absolutely mystifying. The overcommitment to Keelan Robinson early in the game, not going to, I think, Jonathan Brooks enough. So offensively, they got to go back to the lab in the spring, and everybody's got to get better, right? We've talked about Quinn Ewers has got to get better. Quarterback position's got to get better. The running game's got to be completely rebuilt. And that receiving core has got to get a lot better. And look, if Xavier Worthy is going to be your number one guy, he's got to get his shit together. I mean,
look at the comments. I mean, and look at Orangeblood's message board. You hate to say this, but I mean, it feels like Xavier Worthy kind of lost a lot of the fan base tonight, and they'll get over.
Is there anything to even who do you compare this? Where Xavier Worthy's Q rating, no pun intended, with the fan base, it's Garrett Gilbert levels of get the hell on out of here.
I mean, yeah, does a game like this change his mind or maybe make up his mind as far as his future in Austin? I don't
think so, because I think he's coming back. I mean, literally
I thought so before tonight, but what he's going to, probably he needs to stay off social media then, because he's not going to feel very wanted in Austin after tonight. So I don't know.
No, and I don't know what – look, he's a shell of the guy that was dominating last season. Now that this season is over with, we can firmly say he had a sophomore slump and that this season wasn't as good as last season. It wasn't terrible. There were still he still leads the Big 12 in touchdown receptions. There are positives. He had 7 for 84 tonight. Not great, but not awful.
Mm-hmm.
But
14 targets tonight. Yeah.
He has, if you're going to be the best receiver on the team, and you're going to be a guy that gets 14 targets a game, and that's pretty on point with kind of what happened all season. He was always in double digits. You have to perform better. Xavier Worthy doesn't look like a guy that has improved at all. And I don't think catches have been as big of a problem all season long as a lot of people think they have. He had 7 going into the game, 15 in 2 years. That's basically 0.5 per game, extrapolated over 2 seasons. But he had a lot tonight. And his ability to track the ball, his effort at times, you add it all up, and it's a lot of stuff. And I think in this new NIL world that we live in,
yeah, you got to back it up. If you're getting that NIL
I think people know the backstory of it. I think they know he made a lot of money. I think they know he made them give him a lot of money, that the portal was a thing that was a threat used last year. And I think the fact that he's struggling is a real good sign that just moving forward in general, the portal is going to do some interesting things with the way people view players. And Xavier Worthy right now is just a really interesting guy. I don't want to put words on because you could say, well, the people on Orangebloods and the people on Twitter and, it's a small faction of fans and maybe it's not a full representation. You're right, though. Don't get on social media. Don't get on Orangebloods. Don't have any of your family on social media or Orangebloods. It is a bloodbath, and it feels personal for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what it looks like going in. It's 9 months until they play another game. And this will be it'll be a difficult situation for which the next 9 months Xavier Worthy living through. I don't know. Again, Jason, there's no other player that I can think of in recent Texas football history that I feel like is getting this kind of vitriol. You almost have to go back to when not Quinn Ewers, but Garrett Gilbert was getting booed off the field by fans who were remember he kind of got scapegoated as the reason 5 and 7 happened before people could truly come to grips with Mac Brown's personal responsibility inside of that. It was like, that's his fault. And then by the end of that second season, he just had to shut it down. I don't think it's that bad, but it's the only thing I can think of to compare it to.
It's not that bad. And someone mentioned Sims, and it's not that bad with Chris Sims. Those guys, but we're talking about a receiver versus quarterback, but it's a whole other world. Like, people keep talking about the NIL money in the chat. And it's true, man. If you're commanding that kind of NIL money and demanding that kind of NIL money and flirting with leaving, and people use the term holding Texas hostage for more NIL money, man, you better back it up. You better play well. And what Worthy turned in tonight, especially that third quarter alone, I mean, he's had more drops this year, than I can remember, than I can count. But, yeah, I mean, it's not as bad as Garrett Gilbert. It's not as bad as Chris Sims. But
that we're eliciting those memories.
That's what we have to go back to. And this is thankfully for him, this is the last game of the season, so he doesn't have to hear about it all week going into another game, and probably won't have to field questions for a whole week or 2 weeks or whatever it would be. But it's going to be hard to turn the page on this one, man. I thought before the game tonight, he's coming back. After the way this transpired, Texas loses, and a lot of it is on his shoulders. And maybe I'm being overly dramatic. Maybe this is for the overreaction show on Monday. I don't know, but I could see this scenario. And I'm not saying this is what I'm expecting, but I could see a scenario where he's like, you know what? Screw it. I need a fresh start. People in Austin now hate me. They don't even want me around.
He wants to be here, though. That's the weird, like the ironic part is I don't think all of the people.
You want to be where you feel wanted, and he's not going to feel wanted, not for the foreseeable future. He's not going to feel wanted by the Texas fan base after this performance.
Yeah, I mean, let's go to some super chat comments. We've got a bunch of them. Let's knock a few of these out. For those wondering, Anwar Richardson will join us live from San Antonio as soon as the post-game press conference is over with. In the meantime, we'll kind of catch up on the super chats. I want to encourage you guys to use it, get in. We'll use that now. Love the passion from JT Sanders, though. Need the next generation of leaders. I wonder what I wonder. It sounds like Jatavion was getting after Xavier Worthy on the sidelines, the way the TV guys were kind of discussing what happened between the end of the third quarter going into the fourth quarter. They talked about Jatavion's passion, but they then said that Ewers had to come over and like defend his guys. And I was like, thinking to myself, well, Sanders is one of his guys, like they're all Ewers guys, right? Like, so I'm curious about how that looked and how that played out. But yeah, the team at that point was down by 2 scores and needed somebody to change the tone of what was going. I'm with you. I love the passion by Jatavion Sanders. I am curious about the detailing with that, and I'm sure I'm reminded of the 2003 Holiday Bowl when Roy Williams and Cedric Benson and Vince Young were all kind of screaming at each other in the game, and what was thought to have happened that night was that the receivers, Roy, BJ, and Sloan, left, and the chemistry of the team got better. Whether that's fair or not, because those guys were super productive players, and you wouldn't say that a team without Roy Williams is better because they then put Tony Jeffrey in his place the next season. Like, you didn't get better, but the next year's team went to the Rose Bowl, and that team in 2003 lost in the Holiday Bowl, ironically, to a team from the state of Washington that night. Coy Davidson says, meaningless bowl game should be discounted. Obviously, no Bijan changes everything. I don't think Quinn has it to carry a team.
I don't buy that. This isn't a game. This is
I
basically
don't know.
Home game for Texas. I didn't feel like that they went out there and weren't motivated and just went through the motions. I mean, that's not why Texas lost this game. I mean, no Bijan changes everything. But I mean, yeah, you got to think they ought to run the ball more than 14 times.
They win that game for me if Bijan Robinson and Roshan are playing, but
I don't know, man.
if it's and nuts or cherries and nuts,
I mean, Washington sat on the football for a lot of the fourth quarter too. So I mean, who's to say if Washington might have scored 34 points if it needed to. I don't think
45 yards rushing though from your running backs. Now look, Washington, we talked about this for weeks. That was the 33rd, I think, best rushing defense in the country. They're pretty good at defending the run all season long.
Better defense certainly against the run and on the defensive line, I think, than people gave them credit for coming into this game. So
Quinn Ewers ends up throwing for a career high 369 yards, which is kind of what we expected too. Like Washington could be had in the back end of their defense. It probably should have been 450.
Yeah.
I don't mean to make light of it, but Quinn Ewers ends up throwing for a career high number of yards, and they left some meat on the bone.
And Michael Penix throws for a very respectful 287, but that's a low number for him in a 112 QBR catch. If I put in my post-game notes, if you had told me Washington's going to score 27 points, he's going to throw for 287 in a 112 QBR, I would have said Texas wins this game by multiple scores, 2, maybe 3 scores. I mean, Quinn Ewers, did well enough. Quinn threw for a ton of yards, but his QBR is only 139. It wasn't like it was out of this world good performance. Now, again, you factor some of those drops in, and that's probably a 160 QBR or higher if some of those catches are made. But this game did not unfold the way I would have foreseen, because I just 112 rating for Penix. I would have thought Texas would have won this game handily, but again, Texas didn't capitalize and left. You said it, and I said it. Left a lot of meat on the bone in this game.
Chris says, seems like the defense went back to bend but don't break mentality, non-aggressive, giving up passing yards in the middle of the field. Quinn seemed to play better in tempo where he's not thinking as much.
Why don't they use more tempo? I've wondered that all year. And he did play well in tempo early in the game and late in the game when they had to go tempo. I swear every game, I've said this, like I put in my notes as I'm watching the games, like, okay, Texas is going to some tempo, and it seems like he's getting into a little bit of a rhythm. And then they'll, like within the same drive, sometimes they'll go from up tempo and then they'll start slowing it down. I'm like, I don't know. It just seems I'd love to get someone to chart when they've gone up tempo, what their success rate is. But I do agree with Chris that it seems like, maybe it takes some of the thinking out and you just let him go out there and play ball and be who he is. But it does seem to me when they go up tempo that they find a little bit more rhythm there in the passing game.
I don't think what the defense did tonight should be a surprise. They're a less aggressive defense in general when they play quarterbacks that are run threats. Now, Michael Penix Jr. didn't run around a lot. I mean, he's always running around, but he didn't get involved in the running game tonight like he has at times for Washington this season. But Texas plays a little bit more umbrella, bend but don't break. They do not like to be over aggressive. I think that when we talk about sack numbers, maybe that has a little bit to – I know they got some pressure on Penix, but it never felt like he was hitting the ground a lot tonight. Hurried at times, they were able to make him. But, boy, even when Kwiatkowski talked to the media this week, he mentioned, thought the pass rush was good this season, would have liked to have been able to get guys on the ground more than they did. Kind of the story tonight, not because sacks are the end-all, be-all. I probably make too much of sacks and not enough of things like hurries. But, man, when your defense finishes the night with 0 sacks and 0 tackles for loss, it's not completely insignificant either. And that's an area where this team's got to continue to get better. I really don't remember. They've got Ovio Gofu with 4 tackles. I don't remember him playing tonight.
I saw him out there. You don't remember any plays. Johnny Barron was really good. Jaron Thompson was fantastic.
The secondary guys were all great. They really were. I mean, and not because they all finished with a bunch of tackles, which, that can be a bad sign too when it's like, hey, look at the DBs all made a bunch of tackles tonight. They were just great. They tackled well.
Anthony Cook played well. Terrence Brooks played well when he came in.
I would say, boy, Terrence, got to have that interception.
Yeah.
Got to have that.
That's potentially a game-changing play,
especially when that was a 7-point game. That
I think it was 10, right?
The next play they convert 3rd and long,
yes,
and then go out and finish that drive and get points. You're not going to beat up a freshman too much. He made a great play. I guess he made a very good play. A great play would have been to catch the ball and make the interception. But they just lacked playmakers tonight. And that is, as they continue to recruit really well, Jason, that's one of those things that they've got to do a better job of, is making big plays on defense. Tonight, I thought tonight, you wouldn't say that tonight was Jaylen Ford's worst game of the season, because he had 0 tackles in the opener. Yeah. But for a guy that finished with 10 tackles tonight, I thought he struggled between the hash marks and the run game. He was as responsible as anybody for the long touchdown run in the first half. Without him making a big play on defense tonight, and with there not being any overshown on the field, Texas really lacked guys making plays. Barron Sorrell, 3 he's another guy I really didn't know. I didn't notice him at all tonight. I know he had a couple of hurries.
I don't even remember those, but yeah. But Ford, I think in the first half I had in my notes, and I didn't put it in when I published my column or my write-up, but I think he had 3 tackles in the first half, and the only play I remember him from the first half was the touchdown run. He took the wrong gap, and then he tried to cheat and come back over and missed the tackle. And so, Ryan Watts could have helped and got that guy on the ground downfield. But that touchdown was on Jaylen Ford. That was a 7-point play that he made a big mistake on. That was the only play I remember him from the first half. I look up in the box score, and he filled up the stat sheet with 10 tackles, but was not one of his better performances for sure.
That one play in particular, and we won't make too much out of it, but it was a big play in the game. It was like a clinic play for what not to do as a linebacker. Like, he tried to cheat, then he got sucked into traffic because he came up too much, and it left him with an awful angle to try to make the tackle. And once he missed the tackle, it was off to the races. It was the kind of play we saw a lot at times last year, and obviously going back to much worse defenses in the history of that we've seen over the course of the last decade, where it was a callback to worse days. And that didn't happen again. There weren't any other really big major busts quite like that one, but I thought Jaylen Ford played a game tonight that probably, to me, indicated he needs to come back to college for another year. I don't know that was the springboard of the NFL that he would have hoped for. Jason, hello, Jason. Good to see you again. Always in the chats. Love having Jason in the chats, and on Orangebloods for that matter. How many first-year coaches does Sark have to lose to before we realize what he is? Jason, it's a fair question. We're 25 games into the Sarkisian era. They're 13-12. They didn't look awesomely prepared tonight. And his side of the ball, it took a half to really kind of get going. They just didn't know what to do in the first half, really. In the third quarter, they start finding some rhythm, and then their talent lets them down more so than the coaching. But I did not think Steve Sarkisian had a night to write home about.
No, you got over a month to prepare, and that's what they turned in from that first half performance. I mean, and I get it. And there was a lot of debate on Orangebloods about, was it Quinn Ewers or was he bad? Was he good? He scored 3 points. Okay, that's on Sark, and to some degree it's on Ewers, but that did not look like a well-coached football team tonight. Yes, the players own a lot of accountability for the drops and the false starts again, and some of the mistakes we saw, but they get a punt blocked. Just the offensive inefficiency, some of the inability to get the run game going, and then you're running Keelan Robinson up the middle, which is kind of just weird to me. You got 3rd and 3, and you're kind of in 4-down territory, and you decide to throw it, and it gets dropped. You end up punting the ball. And that's a perfect spot. Run Jonathan Brooks twice right there. move the chains and keep that drive alive. But I did not think this was a very well coached game by Sarkisian tonight, and that's I think Jason's point is very fair to ask. I mean, how many first year coaches does he have to lose to before you start questioning things? And it's a legitimate question.
I think the suggestion here with Chris Boyd texting at halftime is that he would be the last guy to maybe compare Xavier Worthy to. Maybe, but man, maybe my memory is failing me. I don't remember Chris Boyd being as toxic as the relationship between Xavier Worthy and the fan base.
At that moment, I don't know, man. Chris Boyd was pretty well hated there for a minute. That was pretty bad. I didn't understand.
I mean, after the game, were there 20 Chris Boyd posts?
I bet there were during the game and maybe after. Yeah, that was pretty bad. Yeah.
So maybe you think maybe that's the one. Maybe that's the one. Good job, my man. Thanks for that's a good reference point. I don't personally quite remember that.
But it wasn't
a lot of rogue product after the fact.
It was pretty bad. It wasn't related to his play on the field the way Worthy was related to. His texting didn't cost Texas the win for sure. But
God. Yeah. Hey, Mark, real quick. Thank you for the super chat. I don't see a comment in our super chat section. So, Blake, be on the lookout for a Mark question. And Mark, I promise I don't want to just take your $20. So we will look for you in a little bit in the chat if you can resend whatever your comment was going to be, but nothing is attached. Back to the super chat of what we have here. Where'd it go? Hold on. I need to open this box up so my blind ass can read what the hell's in here. Worthy's head was not in this game. I think all the talk got to him. If you're going to be the guy at Texas, you have to come and play in games like tonight. BC 312, I mean.
Another fair assessment. It's not a question, it's a fair assessment. Yeah.
I can't say no to that. I mean, if Xavier Worthy's response was no, I was in this game, my head wasn't elsewhere. I mean, all you could say is the play didn't look like it. And for a guy that was asked the other day about his long-term future, and he said, I'm completely focused on Thursday night. And I mentioned this in early October. Someone has to talk to him about his body language. You can't, because here's the problem, Jason. When you pout, when it looks like you don't give a shit at times, and then you drop passes, that's when people lose. That's the crux of all of this. For weeks and weeks and weeks, Texas fans have watched Xavier Worthy run deep passes. Now, look, there are times when he's been open, down the field. But when that ball's not on the money, he cannot hide the disgust that he feels with his body language. There's nothing encouraging about going back to the huddle and, hey, it's okay, we'll get him again. It looks like he's fed up. And I think the first game it happened, Xavier has some skins on the wall, so nobody made a big deal out of it. But then it happened 2 times and 3 times and 4 times, and now we get to a bowl game. And again, there's a little bit of sometimes it just doesn't look like he's trying. And then when you drop the passes, the avalanche is going to start. And I think tonight it was like a pimple, a bad pimple on a teenager. And at first it starts small. And then eventually it's just like a big old pussy, ugly, nasty thing. And tonight that bad boy got popped. And it wasn't pretty. And I would imagine Xavier Worthy will be a frustrated guy walking out of the locker room. That kid lives on social media. He's one of these, these kids, they don't know anything else. So there's be no way to tell Xavier Worthy tonight to stay off social media. and it will be ugly. I feel bad for him. I wouldn't want anybody to have to go through that, but there's going to have to be some self-reflection from Worthy about how did we get to this moment. And there's a lot of layers to it. The NIL is part of it, but I think the body, I don't think people really, I shouldn't say people don't begrudge the money. They do, but some of them do. But boy, it's the on-field stuff that I think has people really frustrated. And people can say, if you're going to make all that money, you better make plays like it's pro football, and that's fine. I think this is a lot more about the perceived attitude that, whether fair or not, I think there's a perception of his attitude. And I think that's what people are reacting to. And he's got a long way to go. It's going to be a long offseason.
I'm really Sark's talking right now, and Quinn Ewers is with him. Looks like Coburn is with him. And I'm curious to see what they're going to, what Quinn Ewers is going to say. I mean, I know we'll get
Ewers will say the right things. Tonight, they got to have Xavier Worthy on the podium.
They'll say the right things. Looks like Anthony Cook's in there too. But I don't know. It's all year. It feels like from a distance, people, including we, have been questioning his effort, his body language. I mean, tonight, the one drop hits him right in the numbers. The other one's a low catch, but it bounces off his hands. And the other one, he kind of tries to catch it on his hip almost. And it's just like, dude, use some fundamentals and focus. Actually focus on this ball a little bit. I think fans have every reason to be frustrated with Xavier Worthy. I'm not saying they need to run him out of town and, cuss him out and call him some names that I saw him called that I had deleted off of Orangebloods. Have some be civil about it. But, hey, he's making a lot of money. These guys are basically professional athletes now. He's certainly not above criticism, and he deserves it after his performance tonight.
I just think it's funny, at halftime, all of the conversation of focus was on Quinn Ewers.
Mm-hmm.
And that third quarter changed the entire conversation about the game.
We had a big debate on our Orangebloods Slack group about, was Quinn Ewers the reason they were behind? Was he terrible? Was he okay?
There was no conversation really about Worthy.
No, and then the third quarter, it all flipped.
Right.
I don't think
so. So that's happening in our Slack channel. I can only imagine what it's like in living rooms. I know what it's like on the message boards on Orangebloods. Well, I said it when we started the show. I knew there was going to be a point where the Xavier Worthy thing would take over the show. It has. It was unavoidable. Kyle says, are we close enough to being in the SEC to bust out Old Faithful? We just didn't want to be there.
If it makes you feel better, Kyle, go for it. Yeah,
for sure. Yes. You know what? Texas is close enough to the SEC that if you want to bust out Texas just didn't want to be there to make yourself feel better, Jason's right. You do whatever you need to do to help you sleep tonight. BC 312 asks, would a USC even want Xavier Worthy after tonight? Now, look, USC just landed Dorian Singer in the portal from Arizona State, was a Pac-12 first-team player. I don't know that I've said this before. I don't think USC, if Xavier Worthy was going to enter the portal, I don't think they're the team anymore. I think they bring back almost everybody at wide receiver other than Jordan Addison. They've got Mario Williams coming back. They've got, obviously, Zachariah Branch coming in this season, the 5-star. So it might not – but from a 30,000-foot view, no, probably not USC. But would some other team – would Alabama take Xavier Worthy? Yes, they would. They would. I still don't think Xavier Worthy is going anywhere. But I can't deny what Jason said, which is, could tonight change anything? It could. If it's as ugly moving beyond tonight, Jason, if in a week from now it's still ugly on social media, I don't know. I mean, he'll have options, and there's no getting around the fact that he's going to have a long off season, and the expectations are shut up, get better, play better. And I don't know that Texas fans really want to see or hear anything from him other than a commitment to his craft moving forward. Chad Gibson says in the super chat, Jalen Ford did not have a good game. Does he go into the NFL draft with that being his last performance? Chad, we talked about that. It was not a great game from Jalen Ford. It wasn't his worst. Does he? I don't know if bowl games impact what guys are going to do in the draft. I think he's 50-50 going into tonight. I think the people that I talk to are more worried than they are confident. So I don't know. We'll see. I don't have a great answer for you though, Chad. I mean, back in November, when you go back to the last game of the season, there's a lot of confidence that they had done enough to keep Jalen Ford and T'Vondre Sweat. And there was just a lot of confidence. I've just heard more and more throughout the month of December that Jalen Ford is really considering it, and we'll just have to see. I think if he has smart people around him, I think they tell him to come back for another year. That's just my opinion. BC312 is just living in the super chat. Hey, I'm not going to deny you if you just keep on throwing $20 this way. What's the over and under on Worthy transferring? What would that be? Like a yes or no? Are you asking for a percentage?
Yeah, maybe a percentage, I guess.
I thought it was 90-10 he's staying coming into tonight.
Even though he didn't reaffirm that
that night, I got a text from a source that said Worthy coming back next year is all but done. I think the NIL stuff is handled. They've got Sarkisian has worked so hard on bringing Worthy back, and I think Worthy wants to come back. It would be a complete changing of the mind. Now, I think Worthy has people around him in his group, the team Worthy, that would very much like to see, and that will only be enhanced after tonight. Mm-hmm. The people in his inner circle that want him to move on from Texas, they will have been on social media tonight. They will see it. They will not like it. It will only, I think, increase the pressure there. But Xavier Worthy himself, from everything that I know, has conveyed that he wants to come back. I don't know what to say. I do not know how to handicap.
I would have said 80-20 before, and I'm still like,
I'm 80-20, 75-25 now.
Yeah, I was about to say 70-30 now, probably still.
But you know what? If you were playing Russian roulette and there were 4 slots in the gun and only 1 bullet, I'd be pretty nervous. Like 25% gets scary when there are real stakes involved. Let's see. Michael, my business. I can't put up your super chat. Sorry. I just can't do that. We're not going to call players names, no matter how much you give us. Linda Birdbike says, as long as you're on the team, you should be expected to play season opener through the bowl game, a condition of scholarship. Linda, coaches don't abide by those rules. I mean, coaches, we saw this with Oklahoma, actually. Brent Venables was complaining about opt-outs, but he literally left his team a year ago to take over Oklahoma. It happens all the time. I feel you. I know what you're saying.
Technically, their scholarship ended a couple weeks ago when the semester ended, right? If they're not
technically, a whole bunch of stuff, a whole bunch of things should happen.
Yeah.
But you know what? I watched Florida State tonight. They had a senior offensive tackle, their left tackle, get carted off the field with like a minute and a half to go in the game and it was third. It was either, I think it was second down. So then they weren't going to go for it on fourth down. So on paper, like just to the naked eye, he had to get through 2 more reps safely. And then his college career is over, and then he can go off to the NFL. And I have no idea what like kind of draft stock that kid has. I don't follow Florida State close enough to know, but he's a senior starting left tackle, so he probably has hopes. He got carted off the field tonight. And I've seen enough situations where guys play in this extra game where it ends up backfiring. So I have a hard time looking out for guys or being upset at guys that are looking out for themselves when coaches do it. And when, you know, if you're this close to your dreams coming true, I kind of get it. But Linda, that being said, I understand your frustration because I've already said I think Texas probably wins this game with a healthy Bijan Robinson and Roschon in this game. I don't know that Jason completely agrees with me on that because there's a little bit more nuance to what happened than just a blanket statement like that. But I feel like those two guys might have run – Texas might run for 200 yards in this game with those guys as opposed to 50 without it. Trey says both Brooks looked great. Thoughts on Ewers in the D-line? Terrence Brooks looks great. I don't know that Jonathan in the limited amount of game reps that Jonathan Brooks had a couple of touchdowns. Maybe great is fair enough.
Yeah. I like his little touchdown run. What was it, like a 3-yarder? But he finished it like 5 yards deep in the end zone, man. I mean, he didn't just get across the goal line. He kept plowing.
I thought we would see a lot of that kind of running tonight.
Well, it seemed like they wanted to get it from Keelan Robinson early on. I didn't understand that part of it. Thoughts on Ewers? You know, I mean, I look at Ewers, I'm like 31 of 47, 369 yards, only 1 touchdown, QBR right at 139. But really, it probably should have been – I mean, he probably should have had over 400 yards. And, you know, if Xavier Worthy catches that ball and goes on to score, that's a QBR. You're adding, 50 yards, whatever it was, and another touchdown. That's probably a 165, 170 QBR. So
his numbers kind of got helped a little bit by that last play of the game, too. He throws the long ball. I'm just saying that
true.
You're right about the – adding a touchdown in the Worthy
touchdown. The touchdown was more Jonathan Brooks than it was Quinn Ewers. Let's be honest. That was a nice run after the catch by Jonathan Brooks. But you know, I can't nitpick Quinn too much. I mean, I'd give him probably a B. And then the D line. I thought the D line. You know what? Maybe I'm in the minority. I thought the D line played pretty well. I mean, I know they didn't get.
I thought the tackles played well. I didn't think the edge players did.
I mean. Yeah, I thought the interior of the D-line was certainly better than the edge. But
I give those guys an A. I thought the interior really was the reason, along with the play of the secondary, for why Michael Penix Jr. had the game that he had. There was an interior rush that was in his face that gave him problems all night long. And, yes, Blake, we see the Anwar's here. We'll go to him in just a second. Matter of fact, we'll bring in Anwar Richardson right now just into the conversation. Oh, that was my fault. I double-clicked. Really good. Anwar, by the way, you look immaculate tonight. Love the navy blue on you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Whoo, boy. Welcome to the Xavier Worthy hate session post-game show.
There's a lot of material to work with.
Just so you know, we tried. We went into the very beginning of the show saying this will eventually turn into some Xavier Worthy focus because so many people are really wanting to discuss Xavier Worthy, but it's dominated the discussion since about 10 minutes in. So before we do any other super chats, before we kick Jason out, what was said in the post game? Did Xavier speak with the media?
Come on, Chetch. How long have you done this? Why would you even ask?
I had to ask. I'm flying blind here. He spoke the other day, so
Yes.
thought maybe they'd bring out the same guys that they had speak the other day. So what? I know he had to have been asked about. So what did in the post-game presser the conversation?
You appreciate it, Catch. Like 20 minutes in, no one really had asked him that question. So I had to be the last question in, Catch. Because I was like, okay, this is going to get covered. And I'm like, okay. like last question. I'm like, so Coach, the drop passes, how disappointing was that? So yes, I just had to interrupt you because it's just been our running joke all year long. And by the way, anything you're hearing in the speaker, they're putting in the Washington press conference and the press
It's
conference.
okay. You're all right.
Okay,
we can hear it, but it's not terrible. What's terrible is the idea that press conference would have gone on for 20 minutes and nobody would have asked about the thing that literally Anwar, I mean, I don't know how to get away from it. Like Jason and I have been talking about it. I don't know if you've been on Orangebloods. It's bad.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've been on Twitter. It's bad.
It's really bad. It's worse in those streets.
Somebody asked us to handicap Xavier Worthy transferring. And I was like, look, man, going into this game, I would have said 95-5 at this point that he stays. The NIL stuff has worked out. Sark has recruited him. He seems like a guy changing his number, that he wants to be here. The vitriol tonight's so bad that there's been speculation like, would this be the kind of thing that would change his mind? I don't know how to talk about it.
Well, Kitch, there's a couple of different things associated with it, and it starts with kind of the attention that Xavier brought on himself as relates to this whole thing, right? So, and you have no clue how loud this damn thing is. Like
we do.
Literally. Okay.
we actually do. It's loud.
It is absolutely ridiculous. All right, I'm going to try to have to do this and la this thing out to conform my thoughts. So, but this is, Xavier is the person that scrubs all the followers, from his Instagram. He's the one that, previously threatened to leave. And then, he's a guy that, we talked about this on this earlier this week, where we said, like, okay, when he gets asked a question about staying or leaving or where he's at, he's basically telling, if he doesn't say I'm a part of it, Longhorn fans are going to feel some type of way, because he basically is saying I'm potentially entering the transfer portal, right? And by the way, guys, you're saying I need to move. You have no clue. It's everywhere in here. Like, it's like there's literally nowhere to move. So I'm just doing the best that I can. It showed to be like maybe hopefully at 5 more minutes. There's not that many Washington media members here. And then, you have a performance like this, Catch. And there's, it started off, I'm sure you talked about it on our Slack channel. At first, it looked like, okay, there were some passes that Quinn threw that were kind of questionable if Xavier could have caught that or not. We had some debate, going back and forth. And then there just became those back-to-backs where it just was one clear touchdown drop after another. And, it ends up being the thing that I asked Sarkisian about after the game, which is, hey, how, as a play caller, how disappointing were those drops today? I did give him a positive. I did tell him, hey, and also talk about Casey Kane and his performance, right? So it wasn't just going to end it on a horrible note. So he did Casey Kane first, and he's like, okay, really proud of him, the kind of the progress that he's made, and kind of going from start to finish, like really happy what he saw from Casey Kane. But then he said, today was basically he viewed it as a microcosm of the season, where it just has been very inconsistent, not good enough as far as the drops are concerned, kind of a little bit hit or miss. He started talking about Quinn, and in the next, and Quinn trying to develop a rapport with them, where I got to go back and listen to it, because the first thing he kind of addressed was Quinn and what Quinn was able trying to do as far as getting the ball in the right areas, but then not always necessarily being in the rhythm. But then saying that's going to be a big point of emphasis for them in the offseason is essentially trying to eliminate that, because he said we need to be more of a dynamic passing game. We need to be more dynamic, and we got to have pass catchers in order to do that. So, he didn't mention it by name, Xavier by name, but we know exactly who he was talking about and what he was referring to. And we basically said that has to be a big emphasis, a huge emphasis for them in the offseason.
Jason, do you want to get off this, or do you want to hang out a little bit longer?
It's way past my bedtime, and I've got the press conference on pause, so I'm going to go listen to Anwar's last question of that press conference. I
just asked Jason at 12:35 at night if he still wanted to hang out with us and do more post-game show. What was I thinking? All right, Jason, go watch the press. Go to sleep. Go watch the press conference. Manage the message board. Whatever you were going to do. Appreciate the help tonight.
I need to do that too. Yeah, all right, guys. Have a good night.
Go get drunk.
Too late for that.
He said too late. Did you hear what he said? Which goes to my theory, what I said on Slack earlier.
Give me some initial thoughts on tonight. I mean, maybe I'm telling you, Anwar, it's crazy. The conference, it's so Xavier centric. So much of the conversation, it really is almost anything like I've ever seen with regards to vitriol towards a player. Not a quarterback?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've seen Chris Sims and Gary. Somebody brought up Chris Boyd and the tweeting at halftime situation against Oklahoma a few years ago.
I think maybe who was the safety? I think it was Brandon Jones. I think he got a little bit of vitriol.
Well, Caden Stearns, because
that's what I'm thinking about.
The eyes of Texas.
That's what I'm thinking. Caden Stearns got a little bit of that with the eyes. It's the last time I can remember people. But this one seems to be to another degree. I had a BMD, text me in the middle of the game saying that guy can go. Like, that's where it was from, I'm ticked off. And I'm talking about a guy who donates a lot of money, who donates.
I had the same thing on War.
Yeah, donates to the NIL and donates, 7 figures. He was like, that guy can go. We don't need that on our team. Because I think what's irking people, Catch, is what they would view as the effort or lack of effort that's they're not seeing. Like, the drops is probably one thing, but there's other stuff where they're saying, like, if it's not perfect, if it's not just right there, that he's not going to make an effort and fly, and fight for the ball. That seems to be the thing that is really out there. I'm sure you probably got that as well.
Yeah, it's funny. One of the next super chat question I was going to go to or comment was from Triplet Joseph 44. He says the same thing. The problem with X is when he gets overthrown, he throws a fit. When he drops the ball, he walks off like nothing happened. Onward, it's funny. We were talking about this just the other day. The very first time I mentioned Xavier's body language and the optics of his effort was 3 months ago. It was October. So, by the way, thank you for putting it on mute while you're not talking. If no one else noticed, I did. I think this is less about NIL, although there's an element of that for sure. But this is about game. This is about this issue of body language and effort and the optics involved being weeks and weeks stacked up. And I think I compared it to like a pimple popping earlier, but tonight it was a buildup. This was the frustrations from Texas fans tonight are less about that it happened at all and more about we've been watching this kind of, I don't know if attitude is the right word. It's the optics. It's the perception of what people are watching. And they're frustrated. They're frustrated that the guy who seemingly has some optics issues with regards to hustle and want to and effort, that he's the guy dropping the balls, especially when he's the guy that's not committed himself to the program long term. I mean, there are layers to this, but it's something that's definitely built up. It is not a one-off situation.
No, Catch. By the way, the press conference is over, so we should be good going forward. Okay, just want to let you know. But no, it's not a one-off. It has been a build-up, and look, it's when you have someone. It's sometimes you go to the well too many times. So when you threaten to transfer earlier in the year, of course that gets out. Then people kind of question, okay, what's going on? Where are you at? And then he gets rewarded with the NIL thing, and they're like, okay, fine, and then you see the drops that are happening, but then people have been talking about body language all year long, effort all year long, and then you go through this entire season, but then you got somebody that scrubs everyone from his Instagram, so people start going, okay, what's going on with that? Then you hear that he's unsure about his commitment to Texas, and could he possibly potentially go back into, at least threaten to go into the transfer portal. They're trying to work out an NIL thing to keep him around. So, you already have people saying like, all right, and this game could have been the game that everyone moved on. Right,
yep.
He catches one of those two ones. If he takes it to the house and ends up being the game that everyone just says, "Cool, we move on." He drops it, and then there's another pass that wasn't that far behind where he could probably have readjusted, but it seemingly didn't really make that effort. And then as a result of that, it just seemed like it's a hard thing where people it's putting it all on Quinn, where there's clearly things, it's hard when you what they call it, clean hands, right? It's hard to blame others or say things to others if you don't have clean hands. And within this, it's unfortunate, Catch, at this point, because there is so much anger. Well, people believe he blew the game for him. Like, there is a lot of anger towards him, which kind of sucks a little bit because he still was 19 years old, and it's probably a little bit too much. But are we at a point of no return where he feels like this fan base just doesn't give a damn about him? So he's like, I'm out. I don't know. And then here's the other thing. You read things on Orangebloods and Twitter and this and that. People who are the conversation comes up. There's a shoulder shrug of he could go ahead and go. So tough situation, but there's a lot that I'll be interested to see what the next week and change looks like from them, because Quinn actually played good, by the way. Quinn actually played good when it's all said and done.
No, in the second half, someone had a question earlier, like, what do we think of Quinn's performance? I thought Quinn was in the first half. Less, the issue with Quinn is that in the first half, and look, no running game whatsoever. So when you got a struggling quarterback, not giving him any running game to help him with is not a help. But I thought Quinn was just okay in the first half. I thought he played his best football since Oklahoma in the second half.
Mm-hmm.
And he threw the ball with confidence. He threw the ball deep on the money like this. He should have been. Certainly the third quarter was the best we've seen of Quinn since the Oklahoma game. There were some throws in the fourth quarter I think he'd like to have back, and it was less about Xavier then than it was certainly in that third quarter. But this game doesn't end with people thinking that Quinn Ewers is the reason why Texas lost. I don't think it changes the conversation going into the spring. I mean, they've got Arch Manning's on campus in 2 weeks. And I think people are going to put this game behind them pretty quickly when it's all said and done. And they'll start thinking about next year. What Quinn didn't get tonight So he doesn't get a disaster performance that makes going into the offseason Xavier worthy like. If we're going to turn Xavier into a verb, which technically nobody asked for, and I just did. But he also didn't get the Casey Thompson Alamo Bowl performance where it's like, look at me now. Ha! It wasn't that either. It was somewhere in between. It certainly wasn't bad, but you wouldn't say it was all-time great or anything like that. He was really good for a while in the second half. And I think, for me, the totality of the game, pretty good. Good enough to win the game in a world where he's not got guys dropping key passes and the running game's not a complete disaster.
I mean, Catch, if he, I think it's really easy to say if Jordan Whittington doesn't drop his pass and Xavier catches one of those balls, he throws for over 400 yards,
Yeah.
And then, so we're talking about 400 yards and and 2 touchdowns. So, if you add those in and maybe it ends up being 420 or 430 or something like that, you're talking about a pretty impressive, stat-wise performance. That's what those drops kind of do as far as like killing, those overall numbers. I thought rebounding from the first half and getting more into a rhythm, in the second half, I thought he did a really good job. I thought they did a great job towards the end, especially on that 2-minute drive. I thought, he looked really impressive on that, looked really composed. So it's like, that's the thing about Quinn that you'll just have to hope for going forward is what you saw in the second half of this game, what you saw in the first half of Alabama, right? What you saw in OU, what you now hope is that next year you see that consistently week in and week out, right? That's the ultimate goal, because you've seen flashes, but it's about, okay, can you put together a consistent game like year in, week in and week out becomes kind of the thing. What are you shaking your head at? What happened?
Tonight just didn't do enough for me. I mean,
I did something based off of what he has been for the past 4 weeks. I mean, not 4 weeks or 4 games. It wouldn't be 4 weeks, 4 games where he didn't even go over 200. I thought this was way better performance for me.
I said before the game started, I wasn't going to go either too high or too low. Washington's pass defense is pretty terrible. I mean,
so was TCU's.
I watched that game and it was like, okay, now I know why every team that played Washington, like their quarterbacks, had career best performances. He was okay. He was not the problem tonight. I mean, I think Steve Sarkisian was a problem. I think the Texas receivers were problems. I think the interior of the offensive line was a problem. I think the running game was a problem. Quinn Ewers didn't turn the ball over, and he was pretty good. Like, not a problem. So if we're ranking offensive pieces in this game, Ewers, for me, comes out ranking probably higher than anybody, maybe other than Casey Kane, who finishes the night with 4 for 108. Nobody would have seen that coming into tonight.
He gets 50 of it on kind of a last minute.
Well, and I was going to say, I don't know that Quinn probably doesn't go over 400. Well, it would have been close. 50 yards on the last play of the game somewhat changes the numbers for Quinn a little bit. But again, I thought Quinn Ewers was pretty good. And I thought he was great in the third quarter. I thought in the fourth quarter he was pretty good. Not quite as good as he was in the third quarter. But I can't help but look at the totality of Quinn Ewers' season and say we'll know a lot more about Quinn Ewers in 9 months. I expect him to be the starting quarterback when the 2023 season starts. And we'll see where he takes it from there. He's going to have every opportunity to be the guy next year. But consistency is going to be a big issue with him. In the first half, his footwork was all over the place. He's still a guy that, outside of a couple of plays in the second half, we still don't really know what to think of him as a guy hitting targets that are moving down the field. So I don't know. This game for me was a big indictment on Steve Sarkisian. I mean, Xavier will catch all of the strays tonight. I don't know what the plan was running the football. I don't understand the commitment to Keelan Robinson. I don't understand 3 carries in each half for Jonathan Brooks. I mean, your running game with the running backs tonight was 14 carries for 45 yards and a long of 7 yards. That is an abomination. And when you've got a month to get ready for a game, and you know that you've got a young quarterback who's playing without his best 2 running backs, the passing game's been inconsistent. You had to know going into the game that there needed to be a way, one way or the other, they had to be able to run the football. And tonight, they kind of gave up on it. There wasn't a working plan for it. I mean, just I didn't understand what the objective was in trying to run the football the way that they did. Steve Sarkisian is 13-12 in his first 25 games at Texas. He finishes this season with the same record as Texas Tech, who, oh, by the way, beat Texas this season, and Oklahoma, and won their bowl game. He's got to be better, period. And look, they're recruiting at a high level. So better talent is continuing to come in. But I thought Texas looked like a poorly coached team today.
Well, sorry.
And I thought the entire first half was a complete waste of everybody's time. So
I think
as much as we're giving Xavier Worthy a lot of deserved grief tonight, I thought the Texas coaches didn't do enough in this game, and I do not mean Pete Kwiatkowski.
Sark said he knew his game plan going in. He knew he was going to have to pass. He felt like he would have to pass more because he didn't have Bijan and he didn't have Roshan. So he said their goal was to rely more on the passing game. That's what he wanted to do. Now, it's interesting because we talked about the fascinating thing is that if they're trying to play Jedi mind tricks by putting out false information to the media, then let it work. You could do Jedi and tell us that Jonathan Brooks is doing so great and how amazing he is and how great he's looking in practice, and talk about Jaden Blue and how much he's grown up and how he has the opportunity to now play, and now all of a sudden you've seen so much for Jaden Blue. He's so improved. You can do all that and then never play those guys if it works. But there's too much of this Jedi mind trick thing of like, I don't want to talk about injuries and all this other kind of stuff. But it's like, where's the payoff here? Where is your payoff here? Because at the end of the day, Jonathan Brooks touches the ball. How many times has he touched the ball overall? With let's see, six attempts, and then on rushing, and then 2 catches. So eight times he touched the ball and he scored 2 times. I mean, I'm not saying he had monstrous runs, but he did have the good, the reception. So you go and look at it and you're saying to yourself, why is Keelan Robinson trying to run through these tackles? Where is Jonathan Brooks? Where is this person? To your point, the passing game, even though, we'll debate the whole thing as it relates to Quinn. Going into this game, he threw for $197 versus Kansas State, 171 versus TCU, 107 versus Kansas, and then 194 versus Baylor. You got to say to yourself, it's weird. You can't always want to say next man up, and then you have a guy who has the opportunity, and you're like, nah, not you. I felt like going with Keelan was probably a mistake. Not giving it to Brooks and letting him wear it down and be more patient with the run game. I think they should have been able, they would have been able to do that. But I think we've seen this thing before, Catch, where if push comes to shove, if Sark feels like he needs to win a game, he's going to try to pass his way to win. Like, he's not going to focus in. And what was the game, Catch? Why am I asking? I have it in front of me, where he had 49 attempts against Oklahoma State. Quinn did. You know, like, we've seen this before. 39 attempts versus TCU. We've seen this play before, where Sark is like, man, if I got to win, we're just going to go bombs away, and we'll scrap the passing, you know, the run game, and it backfired on them, you know, today, because by not being patient and trying to set up the run, you put it all on the passing game, which is, you know, better in the second half, but the slow first half start ends up being a killer.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that Jonathan Brooks had a carry until the second quarter. You know, like, Keelan Robinson started tonight, a bit surprising. And not only did he start, but, like, he played as the primary back in the first few drives of the game. Like, they weren't bringing in Jonathan. You know, he catches the touchdown pass. That was really, like, his first real contribution in the game. I don't get it. Didn't get it. And Sarkisian's team as a whole, it just wasn't, you know, I felt like, if you're Texas, the good news is everybody kind of contributed to the loss. I didn't think the defense had a weird game. I thought the interior of the line was really good. I thought the secondary was really good. But, man, you play a Washington team and you don't come away with any tackles for loss, 0 sacks, and other than the Jaron Thompson interception very early in the game, which was kind of a gift, there weren't any other big plays being made by the defense. And in the second half, the defense had a hard time. You know, that 90-yard drive that they give up, 14 plays, it ends in a touchdown for Washington, really kind of broke the backs in this game. You didn't want to go so far as to say game over when it happened, but it was close. You know, it might not have been the kind of thing that you'd say on Twitter, but maybe you'd whisper in the Slack channel, like, ball game. Wouldn't do it on Twitter or on Orangebloods just yet, but it kind of felt that way. I just didn't think tonight was a night where very many guys, period, walk out with some real honor to their name. I mean, a few guys on defense, certainly. I think the entire secondary deserves an attaboy. Didn't think Jalen Ford played really well. Didn't really see anything off the edge from Baron Sorrell or Ovio Gofu. And by the end of the game, we're starting to see a lot of Ethan Burke in that edge. They were trying everything, and they just weren't getting there. I don't know. I think one of the real disappointing things about this game, Anwar, is that now this team finishes 8-5, and the bowl game could have been a real springboard to next season. And I walk out with a lot more questions about the 2023 Longhorns than I think I even did going into the game. Like, I don't know how good the running game is all of a sudden. Like, I think we've taken, like, when we've talked about the offensive line has gotten better, they weren't better tonight. And Kelvin Banks played a good game, but the interior of that offensive line was poor enough that they couldn't run the football. And Sark clearly didn't trust his interior of the offensive line or his running backs, just based on the lack of volume that those players got. And look, little volume they got, they didn't produce. Now we're looking at a Texas offense going into next year where the quarterback is a question mark. The receivers are question marks. Like, Xavier Worthy has somehow worked himself into the question mark category. Mm-hmm. And now the running game tonight was so poor that it kind of feels like they're going to have to prove to us early next season that they can get back to where they were. I've had people who were like, nobody's even going to notice that Roschon and Bijan are gone, that the running game might even be better next year. I had a guy ask me in my buy or sell questions a few days ago whether or not I thought Texas would have 3 different running backs with 900 yards next year.
Wow.
And I'm watching tonight.
Wow.
And I'm like, is Jonathan Brooks really going to be the starter? Does Sark really believe that? Because nothing about the way the running backs were used tonight suggested that they felt like this was going to be the Jonathan Brooks. I think every Texas fan on earth thought tonight would be a Jonathan Brooks breakout game. And Texas was like, no, we're good. We're just going to have Quinn throw it a bunch.
Yeah, if for all the hype of the Jonathan Brooks that we received from the staff, obviously, leading up to this game, everything they did in the game said like, no, because at the end of the day, if Bijan's in there, he gets more carries. If Roschon's in there, he gets more carries. And then they put Brooks in there, not as much. To me, with that, if I'm Cedric Baxter, I look at that as, okay, this is my green light. This is clearly, when we start talking about having performances that kind of shut the door, like Quinn having a performance that maybe shuts the door on the arch thing. This would have been Jonathan Brooks goes out and has, $120, something like, now I'm not saying like 200 and something yards, but $120, you go into the all season and say, okay, that's the dude. But when they don't involve him and he didn't feel like it would be strong enough or the running game would be good enough, then you do into the all season with some question marks as to who really is the number one back going in. Yeah. We know who it is on paper, but how long can Brooks hold on to that position with Baxter coming in, Wisner coming in? So, and I'm fascinated, Catch, when, if you're Jonathan Brooks is one thing, Jaden Blue is another. I mean, this is, if you're Jaden Blue, you got to say, what in the world do I need to do? Because I didn't even get just a sniff of potentially getting in. That to me is even, both of those guys have to be wondering what the hell is going on.
Let's go through some super chat questions and try to catch up a little bit. And if you want to still get your super chat questions in, we will definitely get to them. Connor jumps in and says, I think Quinn genuinely played well despite the awful wide receiver play. If Casey Kane is our leading receiver, we're a 5-7 team again next year. Where do you rank? I'm not holding you to this. Where would you rank Texas in the preseason top 25 going into next season with all of the departures and based off of what we saw tonight?
Because here's the thing, Catch. I mean, I need to see what TCU gets at a quarterback. So that's a little bit of a tough one. I know OU did lose. OU's got a good recruiting class coming in as well. So Baylor looks like they're going into the tank. OSU looks like they're going into like a real tank. Like I don't, that golly, Gundy's he's got what, he's had like 11 guys leave already, Catch 12, something like that.
I have no idea what to think of the Big 12, but I don't know what, if you're with those schools though, you're probably looking at Texas and going, all right, they were 8-5 with Bijan Robinson and Roschon Johnson. Mm-hmm. And you start listing all of the guys that they're getting ready to leave. Keandre Coburn is gone. They're losing DeMarvion, and we don't know about Jalen Ford yet, although I think if his support team around him can be honest with him, he looked like a guy tonight that needs to come back and have another season. No, he was an All-American this year, but I thought tonight revealed that he could use another year of seasoning. But you lose Anthony Cook, you lose Deshaun Jameson, and if you're Oklahoma State and you're looking at Texas, you're probably thinking that team's not going to be better than they were this year.
Yeah.
Texas Tech may be thinking to themselves, we're going to win the Big 12 next year. They went 8-5, beat Texas and Oklahoma, won their bowl game. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what to think. I'm not being like overly negative. I'm admitting I just don't know. And maybe we'll feel a little bit better after the spring. Maybe that you'll get some portal additions that will make you feel like, okay, this team's being a little bit better. But you can't look towards next year right now and definitively say 2023 is going to be better than 2022. The early glimpses of tonight show that that'll be difficult to do.
Very, because now you're talking about what you lose, like you said, in your running backfield. We got to see what happens with Xavier and what he ends up doing. You lose a little bit of a DeMarvion, like you said, with all things being out there. This was, like you said, this was an 8-win team, with some key losses. So without them, and it's not. It's those guys.
I'd be an 8-4 right now on WAR without looking at the schedule and picking like when I think the losses would occur. Just in my mind, eyeballing Texas right now kind of feels like an 8-4 type team.
That's probably fair. I don't know. And look, we said it this year, and we were pretty much dead on as far as that is concerned. So I would say that, I think that's fair. I think that's
we did get that right this year.
We nailed it. We nailed it.
8-4.
We nailed it. And, and I'll probably go that way, as well. I think still Texas is still has to be in improvement mode, Catch. Like and here's the thing. I think it would have been easier to say it going if you're coming off a win and you finish with 9, then you go, okay, there's some momentum going into the offseason. You saw some things in the bowl game, some optimism. You end up with a loss, as it was always kind of a little bit deflating, going into the offseason, and kind of 8 wins, kind of 8-5 is kind of like a good, meh sandwich. You had your season, but they still got to go on the road to Alabama. And whatever this team looks like going into that, they got to go on the road against Alabama. And I believe next year is more of the travel year for Texas, if I'm correct, because a lot of these games are at home. So I believe. Let me look at the schedule, but I believe that's when I do more the opposite. So let me see, Texas 2023 football schedule.
Well, you're on the road for the 2 Kansas games.
Yes.
You're on the road for TCU. Oklahoma State's at home next year. Texas. Well, that's the thing. We also don't have the final schedule yet.
Yeah, why not?
Because the Big 12 hasn't released it. So where we think, well, they won't have to go to Oklahoma State next year, or they won't have to go to Texas Tech, they could still get a Big 12 screw job next year. Like, we don't know. They haven't released what the conference schedule in a 2023 season would look like. So it's kind of hard at this point to know.
So technically they should be on the road at West Virginia, on the road versus Iowa State, on the road at TCU, and then at Baylor.
They might give them
Bama, and of course Bama.
At the road at Cincinnati, at the road at U of H. Like, we could see like some weird scheduling thing coming out, because as somebody pointed out to me earlier this week, there have been occasions where we've seen them where when it looks like you should have a home game, it turns into a road game. I don't know. We'll see. Back to the super chat, just because we got so many of them. Mark Greenwald says, so y'all's gut feeling on percentage rate, Quinn or Manning next year if Manning thrives? I think Quinn's. I don't know how to handicap it. I think Quinn's your opening day starter.
Yeah, I don't see a scenario where Arch is starting over Quinn. Not over a guy that got to start one season. Good or bad. Sarkisian had every opportunity. If he wanted to, he could have pulled Quinn this season. He never did, right? And so I think he's always was committed to the growth and development of Quinn, going through whatever growing pains he felt like it was going to occur in order to get to, 2023. And I just don't see him telling himself that I'm going to go through those growing pains a second year with another quarterback. Like, I just don't see that, within him.
The difference between next season and this season is that with Arch Manning, the hesitancy to pull Quinn and go with the backup will change, because there will be a clamoring to see Arch on the field. So if Manning struggles at any point during the season,
Quinn.
I don't know. Yeah,
you said Manning. Said Manning struggles.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. If Quinn struggles at any point during the season, because like tonight, there was a legitimate conversation at halftime as to you score 3 points, the offense isn't working, you're averaging 6 yards a pass, you can't throw it deep. There was kind of a referendum on Quinn at that point, and there were a lot of people who were like, might as well roll the dice and see what Malik can do. And like Sark was just, you and I both knew that. Like, Sark ain't doing that. Sark's just not going to do that, and he didn't. And in the end, Quinn paid off, I think, the commitment that Sark showed him in this game. But I think in a year from now, I think all of that potentially changes. El Presidente joins us in the super chat to say Worthy would go to Utah and kill it. I guess.
I don't know.
I don't know how to respond to that. Yeah, maybe, probably. I think Xavier Worthy could go to a lot of places and kill it. What does an Xavier Worthy redemption tour look like, where all he does this offseason is focus on football because he's mad at how this season went? I don't know. He's a guy that he really cares about football, but he really went through a sophomore slump this season. It reached its zenith in this game. James Wilson says, given the amount of targets that X gets and what he has done with them, do we want him back? I mean, yeah. I mean, yes.
You want him back. You just want him improved. That's all. You want Quinn to improve, and you want Xavier to improve, but you still want him back. He's doing the hard part, which is getting open. Now there's the other portion that needs to occur.
Effort shouldn't be harder than getting open. It's weird. He's open all the time. He's like Tyreek Hill open, but at no point this season did Xavier Worthy's openness really amount to a whole lot, other than the fact that he did lead the Big 12 in touchdown catches, which just feels like an kind of empty when it shouldn't. But the end of the season did not go the way anybody would have thought. By the way, Michael, no worries. Michael had a super chat earlier that I couldn't go to because it was basically name calling. It's all good, Michael. You're good with us. We're never going to do that. But it's all good. Coy jumps back into the super chat. 2022 is over. Who is the guy that takes his team over in 2023? I don't think it's Quinn, the guy who usually makes a difference, the guy that puts them on his shoulders.
I'd venture to say, if it's not Quinn, then you're probably not achieving the heights that you want to achieve.
That's the elephant in the room.
Because if it's not him, look, Bijan was the guy who was essentially putting this team on his back. And as great as Bijan is, as from a running back perspective, still give you 8 wins. So, the quarterback play is important. Again, we've seen it before. Ketch has made this great point about this before. And I'll steal it for the purpose of the conversation. We saw Deontay Foreman rush for 2,000 yards, and we saw Texas win 5 games. The quarterback has got to be the person that you have that takes you over the hump. And if you don't have that guy, you're just not going to win. It's just going to be really, really possible. And you can point towards other programs and things that they've done. And you can point to like a K-State and them being so well rounded like that. Those it's occasionally that kind of stuff slips in. But you've got to have the QB, in order to get it done. Look at TCU. You've got to have the QB.
Yeah, I mean, this program's not taking the next step until the quarterback play is consistently much better than it's been for most of the season. It's just kind of simple as that. Gregory jumps into the super chat and says, does Malik Murphy have a legitimate chance to win the job next year, or is it all talk and it's either Ewers or Manning?
You want to go?
Do you want us to tell you what – here's what I would say, Gregory. Do you want us to tell you what you want to hear, or do you want us to tell you what probably exists in reality? Because in reality, I don't know how much of a like you're going to have to define what legitimate means. Because no, I mean, in the world that I live in, I don't know that. What is legitimate? Are you asking if going into the spring, the slate is wiped clean and everybody starts even? That's not happening. That's not happening. So Malik goes into a situation where Texas is returning its starting quarterback who has more experience, who's played on the road, who started in a road game, who's pretty good tonight. How do you win the job? You have to be so much better in the offseason, in spring football, and in the fall than Quinn that you force the coach's hands. That just feels like you're asking a lot. Hey, guy running with the twos, go up against the first team defense every day in practice and be so much better than the guy who's the returning starter who's constantly working out against the twos. It's a stacked deck. That's what Malik Murphy has a chance, but the deck is not stacked in his favor.
Catch, if we're going to just keep it a buck, Malik Murphy was like the 4th-string quarterback for most of the season. Like, if we just keep it a buck, Charles Wright, came in, before him, so we're talking about, it was Quinn, Hudson, Charles Wright, and then Malik. Malik didn't travel to every road game. When Charles Wright got sick, towards the end of the year, Malik got to do a little bit more traveling. And then, of course, then, Charles Wright's still recovering. Hudson Card goes in. He's the number 2 by default at that point. And I think Sarkisian was very, smart and to try to say some positive things about Malik. But let's just be honest, when you sign, the number 1 quarterback in the class in back-to-back years, there is a expectation like that person is going to play, so no, while I think we'll hear the lip service of it's going to be an open competition, so on and so forth, the reps will prove otherwise. And I think, at the end of the day, Malik will have to just decide what he wants to do as relates to, waiting around, to see if he has an opportunity, if he wants to see where he's at after the spring. But, there's ways to keep this thing close. Catch, you and I have done this long enough. There's ways to keep the competition close enough where you keep a guy hanging out here until August. And then by that August, it's too late for that person to leave.
Malik Murphy having a better offseason and being better than Quinn isn't enough. Because, quite frankly, Hudson Card was probably better than him in practice. But there was a commitment, I think, that they weren't going to roll with a guy that wasn't Sark's guy. Hudson just wasn't his guy. And I'll be rooting for Malik Like personally, I will be rooting for Malik. But it's not, again, it's not even. It's not a completely fair competition because one guy's starting out further ahead than the other guy and has all of the advantages in his favor going into this. So for Quinn to lose the job before the start of next season to Malik would mean that Malik Murphy's had the best offseason of any quarterback that I've probably seen, that either one of us have seen in the last decade. Like, how good would that have to be where he just takes the incumbent's job with all the disadvantages in front? It'd be a hell of a story, but I don't know whether that makes it legitimate. Trey Brown wants to know whether or not Cole Hudson was benched or if he was injured. Yes. I mean, he's coming off of an injury. He did lose some snaps to DJ Campbell as the game went along. Yeah, probably all of that, yes. He's got to get better. That interior of that offensive line, I thought Jake Majors had a bad game tonight. I thought both guard spots struggled. I thought Kelvin Banks had a completely clean game against good players. And you know what it reminded me of, Anwar? When Connor Williams was on campus. And it was like, oh, you've got this all-American caliber left tackle. You have a legit NFL player holding it down at tackle. And the rest of that offensive line was like, eh. Tonight, the offensive line was just kind of eh. And it was a reminder that Hayden Connor's got to get better. Jake's got to get better. DJ, Cole, all of those guys, they will not have Bijan Robinson and Roshan Johnson masking their warts. And tonight you come out of the game wondering, oh, maybe the offensive line wasn't great this year. Maybe it was those great running backs. I talk about it all the time. Emmitt Smith shows up in Dallas, and Nate Newton was just a guy, and Mark Tuinei was just a guy, and Kevin Gogan was just a guy, and Mark Stepnoski, I wouldn't say was just a guy, but he wasn't great either. And then Emmett shows up, and then dudes are going to like 5 consecutive Pro Bowls. And it's like, you know, I think the all-time NFL leading rusher did more for their careers than they – because it always used to be that Emmitt Smith was better than Barry Sanders because he had a better offensive line. And it was like, well, those dudes were journeymen. I mean, a lot of those guys were on their second NFL teams. And then Emmett showed up, and suddenly they got the best offensive line in football. I think we saw a little bit of that tonight. That this offensive line, that as the season has been going on, it's like, man, they're kicking ass in the run game. They're good. And that's like, take that first-round running back out of the equation. You know, Anwar, the guy that we say is either the third or fourth best guy in the history of Texas football.
Correct.
Take him out of the equation, and tonight you're left with 14 carries for 45 yards for your running backs. And it was like, he matters, doesn't he?
Yeah, and by the way, his backup, who, you know, rushed for over 100 yards last season, you know, I think in a couple of games, who's viewed as a top 10 guy, you know, going into the draft, he's pretty good as well. So, but, you know, he was taking pictures, you know, before the game. And
that chain. Part of me just wanted to tell Roshan, hey, man, save your money. Don't make that purchase.
You just can't. They're just young. They're just young. Just don't. They're young. Like you're spending it before you got it, man. Just wait.
Nothing that probably makes me sound older to him than to say, you probably don't need the spinning ice. Just it reminds me of, like, I heard one of the San Francisco rookies, had like a $300,000 restaurant bill the other night. And it was like, come on, guys, give this kid a chance. Don't make the 6th-round draft pick up the $300,000. Anyway, I don't begrudge Roshan and his spinning ice, but get some money in the bank first. That's all I would say as a grown-up. I saw that. I was just like, oh no. That bonus gonna be gone fast. If you're spinning it on ice that spins in circles.
We haven't even gotten to the vehicle.
Roshan, just save a little bit. That's all we're saying. Big Q-Tip 76, which sounds like born in 76 like I am. So shout out to 1976. Says, I don't understand the lack of usage for Brooks and Sanders. Sounds like we got to wrap it up soon. I thought Brooks might have been injured in the pregame. Hey, that wouldn't make as much sense as what actually happened. Had they come to us and said, hey, Jonathan felt a little something in the hamstring and we didn't want to push it, that would make as much sense as we just did what we thought we had to do. That was the plan. So Sarkisian said afterwards, it was a plan to not run the ball. And in the end, every time Jatavion got the ball thrown to him, it felt like he did something with it. But in the end, he only gets 5 receptions for 36 yards. That's not for most teams in college football. The tight end getting 7 targets and 5 catches and 36 yards would be a win. It does feel like you leave a little bit on meat on the bone when Jatavion doesn't go off. I don't know. Sarkisian will be thinking about this game plan throughout the offseason. Our final.
I'm going to send you something real quick, Chris, before you go. I'm going to send in our chat here. I just got the cue and it didn't work. All right, never mind. I'll send it to you later.
Okay, our final super chat question, and then we can wrap up this bad boy because it is creeping up on 2 hours. It is 1:30 in the morning, and it looks like the people in the press box want to go home. Thoughts on the run defense today? Was it an inevitable trade-off for having to play the deep ball so hard, or could we have done better?
I mean, but the running back was decent. I mean, he had, a buck away. He was averaging 7.7 a carry. So,
I thought I thought they missed a Marvion Overshone, and I didn't think Jalen Ford played his best game, and they couldn't get Washington off the field for much of the second half when they needed to.
100%. And then they'd start kind of running at will, in the second half at times as well.
The thing is, you can't ask your interior of your defensive line to stop the run. I mean, you can ask them to maintain the line of scrimmage, but you're still holding guys up. The idea is for the linebackers to fill gaps and make tackles, and they didn't do a great job of that tonight. Was it a trade-off for having to play the deep ball so hard, or look, let me look it up real quick. How did Jet Bush do in this game? I know he had 3 tackles in the first half, but he ends up making 3 tackles in the game. Jalen Ford made 10, 5 of them were solo. Tucker Dorsey made 10. I thought he was anonymous. That's the quietest 10-tackle game I can remember seeing from a player in a long time. I saw Tucker Dorsey play. I just never saw him make a play. And look, Lane, the Texas defense as a whole had 0 tackles for loss. You know what that means? It means the other team is not facing 2nd and 12 ever.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that Washington did that won them the game on offense tonight on War was that they were constantly in manageable down and distance situations.
That's fair.
And when they got penalties and they went backwards, they got themselves in trouble. But they were in a whole lot of 3rd and 2s, 3rd and 3s, 3rd and 5s. They converted a lot of them. And a lot of that was they stuck with their running game. It didn't always produce huge results, but it constantly put them in manageable situations. And it is what the Texas running game was not able to do for Texas tonight. Now, to Quinn's credit, I thought Texas was in a lot of manageable 3rd down situations in this game. They set up their manageable situations with really doing a good job in the short passing game. Anyway, you want to wrap this up? You got any final parting shots?
Yes, I'm ready to get off and go get a birthday drink. So that's my parting shot.
Is it officially your birthday? Yes.
It is officially.
Happy birthday. Happy not quite 50.
49.
I don't even have anything else I want to say. That needs to be the final word. Yes, thanks for hanging out with us all season long. Yes, subscribe to the channel and stick around. We will have the content as we always do. Believe me, I got some hot takes coming on Monday. I can already feel them. I can already feel the hot takes coming. Thanks to Adam Loewy for being the sponsor, the Loewy Law Firm, the sponsor of the postgame show all year long, as is the case every year at this point. If you're in an accident or you're injured, let Adam Loewy represent you, and you'll be just fine. Take that to the bank.
Hey, someone told me I'm the same age as the score versus OU.
That's funny.
Pretty clever.
If you tweet that, that'll get you like 1,000 likes on Twitter.
Oh, you gotta give me. I'll do it in the morning. I gotta think of the wording.
Yes,
I gotta think of the wording. I will definitely do that before I head out. head back to Austin. I gotta figure it out.
All right, guys. It's been real tonight. It didn't go the way any of us. I mean, look, you always want to win going into the offseason. It always makes it a little bit better. But the bottom line was at Washington at 27-20. They were just a little bit better tonight in all phases of the game. Offense, defense, coaching. They were just a little bit better. And Texas will go into this offseason knowing there's a lot of areas they still need to make improvement. We'll be along with you the entire way as they look to make that improvement over at orangebloods.com and obviously right here on the Orangebloods Texas Football Channel. But for myself and Anwar Richardson, I'm going to bed, but I still probably need an hour to wind down. Anwar is going to go get a birthday drink. Happy 49th. Drinks. Plural. Hopefully someone is there to buy them for you. Until next season, guys, you guys take care of each other. We'll see you soon. Later.